Alright, stick with me here, because what I'm about to tell you will flip everything you thought you knew about Lost in Space right on its head. Maybe you remember Lost in Space as a kid. You'd huddle around the TV while the Robinsons soared through the galaxy, with Dr. Smith always making a mess of things and that unforgettable robot flailing its arms warning, "Danger, Will Robinson!" Those afternoons felt simple. Maybe your mom's cooking drifted in while the family TV bathed the living room in light. Or hey, maybe you've never watched a single episode. Doesn't matter. Lost in Space is just one of those shows. Whether you've seen it or not, you still know about it somehow. It's woven into pop culture. But here's the thing. Nobody really knew what went down behind the scenes. Not until now. On October 23, 2025, June Lockhart died peacefully in Santa Monica at 100. She played the Robinson family's mother, and she was the last adult from that original crew. Before she passed, she finally started talking. And not just little stories. She let out things she'd kept hidden for 60 years, stuff the network hoped would never see the light of day. And once she started, the rest spoke up too. So we're jumping back on the Jupiter 2, and this time, we're not leaving until you know exactly what happened, because these people deserve for you to hear the real story. And honestly, it's wilder than anything that ever happened on the show. Let's rewind for a second, because the timeline actually matters. In 2025, only 3 Robinson family cast members were still alive. Bill Mumy, who started playing Will Robinson at just 10, was now 72. Angela Cartwright, who played Penny, was 73. Marta Kristen, Judy, the eldest, was 81. Then there was June Lockhart, outliving almost everyone she'd ever worked with. It's funny what happens to people when nearly everyone who shared those old chapters is gone. You stop being careful. You stop tiptoeing around the story. At that point, why bother? All that's left is the truth. And that's exactly what June did in her final interviews. She said something that, honest to God, made me clutch my chest the first time I heard it. When Lost in Space got axed after 3 seasons, after 3 years pouring her heart into that family show, nobody called her. There wasn't even a thank you from a suit behind a network desk, not even a letter. She found out in the tiniest notice, buried in the entertainment section of her morning paper. That's it. That's all CBS offered to the people who made one of TV's biggest sci-fi classics. 3 years of your life, and all you get is a couple lines in print. Can you believe it? She wasn't the only one hurting. Bill Mumy was only 14 when it ended. And up to the last day, he thought they had another season on deck. His agent broke the news. He went home and cried. Just a kid, sobbing over the show that had shaped his whole childhood. That was it. No wrap party. No one from the network even shook their hands on the way out. Just silence. But here's what really sticks with me. 60 years later, the 3 of them still find each other. In March 2026, just months ago, Bill Mumy posted a picture of himself with Angela Cartwright and Marta Kristen. He captioned it, "Judy, Penny, and Will Robinson spotted on Earth yesterday." 6 decades after the show first aired, they're still there for each other. That one fact says more about Lost in Space than any of the cheesy sets or weird aliens ever could. Under all that camp, they were a real family, but it took sticking together through some very rough stuff for 60 years. Because some of what happened wasn't okay. So let's get to the guy at the center of all this, Jonathan Harris. There's just no way to talk about Lost in Space without talking about him, the man who was only supposed to last 5 episodes but ended up hijacking the whole show. Before all that, he was just a Bronx kid, the son of Russian immigrants, living in a crowded apartment. His dad worked in the garment district. Harris grew up with a thick Bronx accent, but dreamed early on of becoming someone else. He changed his last name at 17, even though his father was furious. Then he earned a pharmacy degree, never used it, made up an acting resume, and bluffed his way into a career. Broadway, The Twilight Zone, you name it. About 125 stage plays in all. So yeah, everything you thought you knew, turns out the real story is just getting started. He never hung back waiting for someone to say go ahead. That just wasn't his style. If he needed something, he built it himself and walked right on through the door as if the path was always meant for him. When Irwin Allen first offered him the role of Dr. Smith on Lost in Space, Jonathan Harris saw the setup right away. he read the script, just once, and spotted a career trap sitting there with his name on it. Smith wasn't written as someone you'd want to remember. He was a cold-blooded saboteur who tossed a body before the first commercial break. The plan was to off him after 5 episodes and sweep the remains under the nearest planetary rock. Harris had been around long enough to know, nobody builds a lasting career off a character designed as disposable. That's not a breakthrough. That's a professional dead end. So, he made a decision. He started almost on tiptoe at first, rewriting the part from the inside out. He showed up on set with new scenes, dialogue scrawled after midnight, sometimes frantic, sometimes funny, always sharper. He'd gather the cast and say, "Let's run this." I switched everything up. Harris made sure that, no matter where the scene started, by the end of it, every road led right back to Dr. Smith. The signs were all there. His melodramatic collapse over a sore back, those comic eye rolls, and most of all, the arsenal of insults he flung at the robot. Bubble-headed booby, nickel-plated nincompoop, bellicose bumpkin. Every single one of those zingers was homemade, nothing you'll find in the original scripts. Harris would stay up spinning out those insults, not for the cheap laugh, but with a method behind the mockery. The way he explained it, the robot knew Dr. Smith's secrets. So Smith had to keep it on its heels, firing off jibes and distractions to cover his tracks. Comedy wasn't a gag, it was survival, camouflaged with laughter. If that wasn't brilliance, I don't know what is. Bill Mummy, still a kid then, watched it happen up close. Years later, you could hear awe and respect in his voice as he described Harris's quiet revolution. Scene by scene, Harris transformed the show. Not with contract negotiations or bold declarations, but with pages rewritten in the middle of the night. Eventually, Irwin Allen caught on. By then, the fan mail was flooding in. Hundreds of letters a month, all for Dr. Smith. Game over. Allen had to roll with it. He even admitted later that Dr. Smith was never meant to be funny at all. Jonathan Harris simply decided he was. The producers wound up giving Harris a special guest star credit in the opening, something no one in American television had done before, and something his contract didn't originally promise. He arrived as a 5-episode afterthought and, by sheer nerve and creativity, made himself the heart of the show. But here's where the story stings. While Harris was building his empire one inside joke at a time, another man stood by and watched his role dissolve, day by day. And honestly, what could he do? That was Guy Williams. If you were watching TV in the 50s, you knew his face. He'd spent 4 years as Zorro for Disney, sword in hand, cape in motion, bona fide American star. Tall, trained, ready, Williams showed up excited to play John Robinson, the head of the family, the leader, the star around whom everything orbited. That was the promise, a show with Guy Williams at the center. But it didn't stay that way. First, it was small. A line cut here, a scene trimmed there. As Dr. Smith moved into the foreground, Williams drifted to the sidelines. By the second season, his presence was shrinking. By the third, the dynamic was locked. Williams stepped onto the set, read his few lines, then faded into the scenery while Dr. Smith, Will, and the robot grabbed the show's heartbeat. Mark Goddard, Don West, put it plainly. Guy Williams carried real hurt over it. Not just professional disappointment, but something deeper. Harris saw what was happening too. There's something almost ruthless about his honesty. He admitted Williams was supposed to be the central figure, but by the end, he'd get 1 or 2 lines maybe, in a week. Harris called it very difficult for an actor to endure. He was right. That pain is real, and it didn't slow him down. Williams filled the long hours with anything but work. Listening to classical music, reading astronomy, playing chess, buying stocks, compulsively combing his hair. Bill Mumy called him the comb, a quiet commentary on Williams's restless, measured efforts to fill an emptying role. There's a story, maybe true, maybe not, about Williams confronting Harris on set. "God damn it, I will kill you, Harris," he snapped, before catching himself. I mean Smith. Was it a joke? Was it a slip? Doesn't matter. It says everything about the tension in that studio. When the show ended, Williams looked around and realized he'd faded right out of the Hollywood frame. His career on TV was gone. But somewhere halfway around the world, the story flipped. In Argentina, Zorro was still a hero. Williams got a luxury apartment, invitations from the president's wife, and the kind of public love that lets you live like royalty for decades. He spent his last 21 years in Buenos Aires, adored and never forgotten by people who never cared about American television politics. On May 6, 1989, the police found him dead in his apartment, alone, apparently gone for a week from a brain aneurysm before anyone knew. No cell phones, no family nearby. The man Hollywood promised a starring role died quietly, a continent away from the business that had moved on without him. Bill Mumy just said, "I never saw Guy Williams again." That's it, the closing line on a Hollywood life. But before I wrap this up, there's one more cast member who deserves to be in the story, a man whose experience went beyond sad, edging into cruel. Bob May. If you watched Lost in Space, you never saw his face, but you couldn't forget the robot. That was him, inside that hot, heavy suit. Bob May only found himself at the audition by chance. He was chasing a different job at 20th Century Fox, but Alan's people said, "Here, try on this robot suit." That was the audition, simple and brutal. Fit in it, it's yours. He squirmed out after that first try, bleeding and cut by the sharp metal from the inside. His was an invisible kind of work, but it shaped the soul of the show. And what happened to him? Well, it's worth pausing over, because he was there, scene after scene, sweating inside that tin suit, bringing the robot to life while barely anyone outside the cast ever knew his name. He took the job anyway. You'd think that meant excitement, pride, something close to glory. Who wouldn't want to be memorable on a show like Lost in Space? But the reality was a lot heavier, literally. The suit Bob May wore weighed around 200 pounds. Under those harsh studio lights, the inside temperature became what May described as a mix between his own private hot tub and sauna. The thing was nearly airtight. It's wild. At least twice, over 3 seasons, May actually lost consciousness inside that suit. His eyes rolled back, he slumped, and the set turned into a scramble as the crew pulled him free. The official response from the production company? No time to stop filming. That's the blunt version. They didn't pause. They kept the cameras rolling. May got back in the suit, or someone else did, but the show was the priority. Add to that a strange little quirk. May was a die-hard smoker. Even inside that suffocating costume, he'd sneak cigarettes during breaks. June Lockhart, who played Maureen Robinson, remembered seeing smoke leak through the robot's seams. She found it quietly hilarious. There's even a story about Irwin Allen, the show's creator, walking onto the set between scenes. He spotted smoke billowing from the hollow robot, panicked, and thought the whole thing was burning up. But no, May was inside, taking a drag. Allen decided from then on, whenever the script needed the robot to emit smoke, May should do the job himself. Strange logic, but that's Hollywood. Now, here's the part that really sticks with me. May was the robot. Every wave, every tilt, every twist, those weren't just mechanical quirks, they were acts of physical storytelling. He gave the robot life, and generations of kids adored that character. Guess what? May never got an on-screen credit. Not once. 3 seasons and not a single episode named him. That meant less money, way fewer residuals. As Lost in Space became a worldwide hit and the licensing money poured in for decades, May and his wife spent their later years living in a mobile home park in the San Fernando Valley. In 2008, a wildfire tore through the park, destroying their home. Just 2 months later, May died of congestive heart failure at 69. But what really sticks in your mind isn't the injustice, it's the way May refused to let it define him. He became a legend at sci-fi conventions, always staying until every single fan had a moment with him. No rush, no impatience. He said he'd sit there signing autographs until the last fan was happy, or the cleaning crew finally made him leave. A man the industry treated as invisible made it his mission to make every fan feel seen. I don't think there's a bigger kind of generosity. And if you think all of that is interesting, the origin story of the show itself is a whole different kind of wild. Before the robot, before Dr. Smith, Lost in Space started as something almost unrecognizable, a straight survival drama called No Place to Hide. This pilot was shot in '64 with a mind-blowing budget, about $600,000, the most expensive TV pilot ever at the time. The cinematographer had 3 Oscars, the special effects guy would win 1. The writer worked on Star Trek scripts. Picture it, a brilliant family, stranded and trying to make it on an alien planet. No villain, no robot, no comic relief. The youngest, Will Robinson, sings Greensleeves by the fire. It was cinematic, felt like a real movie. CBS loved it right away, but they wanted changes. Too serious. Add a villain, they said. Something to stir up trouble every week. Throw in a robot. Redesign the spaceship. Allen suggested Ming the Merciless as the villain. The story editor pushed for something with a bit more depth. They settled on Dr. Smith. The original pilot got locked away. Most of the footage, about 80%, got chopped up and reused in the first 5 episodes of the series. Since those scenes didn't feature Dr. Smith or the robot, they hadn't been created yet, the writers just said those 2 had stayed behind at the ship. That covered their absence. Here's a detail that's almost hard to believe. The Jupiter 2's interior set cost $350,000. That's more than the entire bridge set on Star Trek. And that classic theme music? It was written by Johnny Williams, better known as John Williams, who was just 24 at the time. There's something about all these stories, a sense of how much hard work, luck, and flat-out weirdness went into making something beloved. And somewhere inside that robot suit, Bob May was sweating, struggling, and never complaining. You can't help but respect that. You probably know him as John Williams. Yeah, the guy behind the iconic music for Star Wars, Jaws, and Indiana Jones. Well, before all that, he was the one who set the mood for the Robinson family as they launched into space in Lost in Space. That soaring music, it came from the same genius who would later gift us the Star Wars opening fanfare. Now, let's get into Star Trek, because honestly, there's no talking about Lost in Space without mentioning that rivalry. Most people think the 2 shows duked it out pretty evenly in the '60s, like it was some legendary tie. But the truth is, it was way more lopsided than you'd expect. Lost in Space usually hung out in the 32nd to 35th spot in the weekly ratings. Star Trek? It never got past 52nd. It's wild. The show that now defines '60s sci-fi was losing every single week. The legend beats the numbers, every time. Dig a little deeper, and the rivalry actually started before either show even aired. Gene Roddenberry originally pitched Star Trek to CBS, and a network exec grilled him about production details. Not because they wanted it, but because CBS was already working on Lost in Space. They had zero interest in another sci-fi series, so they turned him down. Roddenberry took his idea to NBC, and Star Trek finally took off. One of the funniest bits from this rivalry happened during Season 3 of Lost in Space. The makeup team needed to create a pointy-eared alien boy, but they were short on time and money. Their quick fix? They borrowed the actual molds for Spock's ears from Star Trek, painted them a new color, and stuck them on their own alien. Hardcore Trek fans spotted it instantly and cried plagiarism. But the real story was simply a favor between friends. Makeup artists on both shows helped each other out to pull off the impossible. That's all it was. Meanwhile, Bill Mumy, Will Robinson himself, was at home watching Star Trek every night. He loved it. He later said he was a true Trekkie the whole time Lost in Space aired. Decades later, he made that fandom official when he appeared in Deep Space Nine, dying in combat. The producer enjoyed killing Will Robinson just a little too much. But here's the part that really gets me. Lost in Space never got a proper ending. The Robinsons never made it back home. They were still stranded on a planet, waiting for a Season 4 that never came. The final episode had them hopeful they'd return in 8 weeks, but CBS canceled the show just like that after Irwin Allen turned down a 4th season with a 15% budget cut. It was announced in February 1968. June Lockhart, the family matriarch, learned about it in her morning paper. Bill Mumy cried. No party, no farewell, nothing. Jonathan Harris, who played the unforgettable Dr. Smith, kept working, even lending his voice to Manny in Pixar's A Bug's Life. When the 1998 movie offered him a tiny cameo, just 6 lines, he told them exactly where they could put it. He'd never played a bit part, and wasn't starting now that he was 83. There was a reunion film in the works, around the early 2000s, until Harris went into the hospital for his back. The same back Dr. Smith moaned about for years. Harris died of a blood clot just days before his 88th birthday. The reunion film died with him. At his memorial, Bill Mumy gave one of the eulogies. Angela Cartwright wrote that she could still hear Harris's distinctive way of saying her name. And June Lockhart, at 96, voiced Alpha Control in the Netflix reboot's third season. Her voice carried all the gravitas you'd expect: sharp, warm, quietly commanding. She died 4 years later, peacefully, after seeing the show canceled, revived, mocked, celebrated, rebooted, and passed down to new generations. She carried that cold morning when she learned the show was canceled, not as a heartbreak, but as something she survived. That kind of grace, surviving Hollywood's blows, staying generous, and keeping the spirit alive, is what Bill Mumy, Angela Cartwright, and Marta Kristen still have to this day. They keep showing up for each other, trading stories about Irwin Allen banging his hammer on a bucket, or Harris marching in with 14 pages of new dialogue every morning. The Robinsons never made it home in their story, but the people who played them never stopped finding their way back to one another. And now, after 60 years, you finally know the whole story.